This is the Law 401 podcast, legal issues decoded for you, brought to you by Roger Williams University School of Law. Hey everybody, it's Nicole. Welcome to Law 401 Legal Issues Decoded, our new podcast. I'm Nicole and this is my co-host.
And I'm Michael Donnelly-Boylen. We are here to talk about issues here in the state of Rhode Island and tackle the legal aspects of those issues and cut through the legalese so that if you're not a lawyer, you're getting an understanding of what's happening here in your home state.
Just to be clear, I'm also here to make jokes and talk about Real Housewives, true crime.
You're here to be Nicole. We get it. We get it.
Great. So I am an assistant dean for curricular innovation at RW Law. I'm a professor and I'm also a librarian.
And I'm a dean here at the law school as well. But what makes me a little different is I am not a JD. I'm not a lawyer. I'm also not a Rhode Islander, but I've been working in this state for over 22 years.
So what are we doing today?
We are here to talk about tariffs and how they affect the state of Rhode Island and Rhode Islanders.
So my first thought is, wow, that's really boring. But I know it's not going to be. Who's our guest today?
Our guest is our boss, actually, Dean Gregory Bowman, who's an international trade expert. He's our guru at the law school on all these issues. So we asked him to come in and talk about how the average Rhode Islander might see an effect from the tariff policies that are being discussed right now.
If we had a sound effects team and you said our boss, I would have said, wah, wah, wah. But we don't, so I had to do that. Welcome, Greg Bowman.
Thank you.
Gregory Bowman? Greg Bowman?
Whichever you choose.
We promise to be kind.
We have not promised that. One of us has promised that. So, are you a Rhode Islander?
No, I'm not.
Are you a lawyer?
I am a lawyer.
So just a warning that we, both of us, but mostly Michael, are going to slow you down when you start talking lawyer and try to make this make sense to sort of non-lawyers in Rhode Island.
That's
right.
The whole idea.
So let's start at square one, Greg. What exactly is a tariff?
A tariff on imports is a tax on imported goods. So it's a tax.
So is there a difference between like a tariff or a duty or a tax, or are those all words that mean the same thing?
They basically mean the same thing, and they're usually on goods.
So tariffs raise the price of imported stuff, but who pays that? Is it the foreign company or is that us?
It's a good question. It can be spread among all of the parties, the foreign exporter and the U.S. importer, but usually it falls in large part or in whole on the customer, the buyer. Right? If you've got a 5% profit margin and there's a 10% tariff, something's got to give. You either go out of business or you raise your price and the consumer pays.
So can we go back just for a second?
Sure.
You said on goods. Now, as someone who sat through law school and shuddered when we talked about the UCC, may my contract professor
Can you explain UCC to the audience, please?
Yeah, what are goods? What's the difference? What's the UCC?
So what's really interesting to me is we're talking about tariffs and we're talking about international trade as if it's only limited to goods, right? But we trade services all the time, right? So an international student coming to the US to get an education and going back to the home country is an export of a service in that sense, right? So when you have a doctor or a lawyer doing something cross-border, that's a service, right? Movies, it's not a physical good. So there's a lot of global commerce that is not goods focused. And we live in a service economy, yet all we're talking about here is the import tax on goods. It's really interesting because it's only part of the international trade story.
So what are you saying? We don't really have a trade deficit, or?
Well, I think the lawyerly answer is it depends on how you define it. But really,
of course it is, Greg.
we do have a much more balanced trade portfolio. I mean, the reason that goods are produced abroad is because the dollar is historically so strong and it's cheaper to produce them abroad. So if you want to lower costs for consumers, you send that production abroad. And what we do here is we're a service economy, high tech, education, lawyers and doctors and such, right? So it's much less problematic than it appears if you only talk about goods.
So let's talk about Rhode Island. Which of our industries do you think is most exposed right now to tariff policies?
Well, a lot of them. I mean, construction. If you're doing steel or concrete or lumber, right? Housing, with plumbing and porcelain and faucets. When you're talking about jewelry, you're talking about renewable energy. I mean, it's really there are a lot of industries that could be impacted. And what's also interesting is the industries that are not. This used to be a manufacturing state, right? And a lot of those jobs were lost to overseas competition, which is part of what's fueling this whole conversation, right? And that's a really legitimate point, right? When people have lost their jobs and their livelihoods and their careers because a factory's been shut down, that's a problem that needs to be addressed. I mean, whether you address it through tariffs is another question, but it's a challenge. It's a problem.
I think we're seeing kind of a theme in some of our episodes, which is something sort of happens internationally or nationally, and it has these impacts that affect us locally. And sometimes it feels like, well, geez, I didn't expect that, or I don't have any control over that. Like, can you help me understand, like, why I'm in Rhode Island, but I'm affected by all these? I mean, you say like international trade, and I'm like, that has nothing to do with me.
So let's look at the things here on the table in the room. Where were your clothes made? Probably not the U.S. Where was this pen made? Not the U.S. Where was this table made? Probably not the U.S. The microphones, the lights, almost everything we have has some international trade component. Smartphones, they're probably made in 20, 30 different countries in terms of the components. If you look at the U.S. economy, dollar for dollar, well over half of every dollar is international trade related. So it affects us daily when we go to the store, when we gas up our cars. It's everywhere. And it's very different than it was 60 years ago. Very different.
So I was reading a story that said that if the tariffs continue in sort of the way they have been in the last few months, I could expect to spend like $2,300 for my next iPhone. Is that something said to scare us, or is that realistic?
I think that's a possibility. I think at the end of the day, it won't be that much, but those costs do get passed on. They can't just be absorbed. I mean, if you're a business and you're trying to make a profit, go back to the 5%, and the costs go up 10, you've got two choices. Well, three choices. One, go out of business. Two, change your business, maybe the services, right? Or three, raise your cost, raise your price. So yeah, that's actually that's $200 a month. Yeah. And for many people, well, maybe they can afford that, but for many people, absolutely not. That's the difference between being able to make ends meet and not.
Yeah, I think about someone trying to like build a deck or remodel their bathroom. Like, how is that going to all play out with this tariff policy?
We'll see, but if it goes into effect at the maximum possible level, it's going to increase the cost a lot. I mean, so imagine you're building a house and it's wood. I mean, where does the wood come from? It comes from trees. Where are there more trees? Canada, right? So Canada imports a huge amount of lumber. It's easier and cheaper to produce there, and then it's cheap to ship it here. So if that lumber goes up in price, your house price just skyrocketed up. And what that's going to do is it's going to slow the housing sector. That in turn is going to cause a loss of jobs. That is going to reduce tax revenue. So it's going to have a lot of these downstream negative effects. It's not just the cost of the kitchen or the house. It's everything else.
And we talked about in a different episode the current affordable housing crisis in Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine that this is going to affect. So one of the issues that we talked about was the lack of, like, there were too much old housing stock, or a significant percentage of old housing stock compared to other states, and not enough new growth. If we're going to curtail the new growth, and we still have this old housing stock, and it's more expensive to sort of refinish that or redo the older housing stock, it seems like that's going to sort of escalate it.
That's right.
The other thing I was reading on the website of American Apparel and Footwear Association. To prepare for this, I don't normally read the American Apparel and Footwear Association website.
I read it every night.
Is that your bedtime story?
It is.
Greg.
That said that fashion share of total U.S. imports is about 5%, while fashion share of total duties is more than 25%, and that there's something called a pink tariff, which is an extra cost for female apparel. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about this pink tariff and how this is even fair?
Well, traditionally, there's been more money in female apparel than men's apparel, right? And that's changed a little bit. But if you've got prices going up in clothing, that's going to have a greater impact on the folks who buy more clothes, right? So what's really interesting, so there's a subplot there that's really important. Tariffs on textiles are one of the oldest types of tariffs, right? So you think about the Industrial Revolution, all the mills all over New England, that was the textile industry. And it was started here to compete against English mills, right? And then we had a lot of production here, and then you have production abroad. So we had tariffs on a lot of imported textiles. So it's one of the oldest areas of modern tariff wars, and it continues. So, but the pink tax, if you're going to buy more clothes, it's going to cost you a lot more, and that's a lot of money.
Sorry about that, Nicole.
I would be remiss if I didn't point out that if there's anyone who is buying more clothes at this table, it is in fact you, Greg.
Well, my Italian pocket square is going to get 10% more expensive if I'm not careful here, so I better buy them right now, right?
So Greg Bowman is always seen at a pocket square. If you see a man walking around in a pocket square in Providence, I put a 50% chance you've run into Greg Bowman. So let's spill some tea. Like that little joke? It seems like tariffs are very intertwined with the history of America and New England, Boston Tea Party.
Yep.
Can you walk us through a little bit of the history of tariffs here in the United States?
So tariffs go back to the very beginning of the country. And in fact, in the U.S. Constitution, there's a clause about export taxes. So you can tax imports, but it's unconstitutional to tax exports all the way back. So that was a compromise with the southern states, because the southern states knew very well that if you tax cotton exports, it's going to reduce their profits, right? Because they couldn't just pass it on to the consumer. So you go back to the very beginning, and probably through the end of the 18th, into the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, tariffs were the biggest source of government revenue. Then you get to the Great Depression. And in the Great Depression, it was caused by the stock market crash. But then it was lengthened and amplified and deepened by a tariff act in the early 1930s called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act.
I'm sorry, what?
The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act.
Is that a real name?
It's a real name.
Wait, is it Mr. Smoot-Hawley?
It's Mr. Smoot and Mr. Hawley.
I'm sorry. Mr. Smoot? Can I start calling you Mr. Smoot?
No.
Okay.
But
great.
you know what? Smoots actually marked the distance on the MIT bridge. They measured it in smoots.
I wonder if it's a descendant of Mr. Smoot of
Smoot-Hawley
of tariff fame.
Yeah. So that came about in the early 30s.
Can you imagine being famous for like a tax named after you?
How about a measurement of a bridge in Boston?
I'd much rather that than a tax. Like, no one likes taxes, right? I mean, sorry, no one but you.
I think the government likes taxes.
Sure.
They definitely like taxes.
So.
Sorry. Smoot-Hawley.
Smoot-Hawley. Back to seriousness. So the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, just as the U.S. was coming out of the crash depression, along came this Tariff Act, which radically increased tariffs on imports, and all the other countries that trade with the U.S. said, well, we'll do the same thing. And global trade dropped by 2/3.
Wait, so
2/3.
Someone thought, oh, we're coming out of the depression. Let's increase the cost of consumer goods through tariffs, and this is going to help.
In order to protect U.S. industries and jobs.
Okay.
And it lengthened the Great Depression, and it deepened it by 6 to 7 years.
Gosh, I will never call you Mr. Smoot.
I just feel like history really rhymes here.
It does rhyme. It does rhyme. So, and then you get to the 80s, and what's really interesting there is the proponents of free trade and low tariffs, the Republican Party, the Reagan Republican Party. They were hardcore advocates for free trade. And if you think back 40 years, and you think back at the real cost of cars or computers or clothing is way cheaper now than it was 40 years ago. And a lot of that is because there are lower tariffs and fewer quotas, right? Quotas, restrictions on the volume of imports. So what did happen, though, is you had industries like the auto industry saying, well, we still need protection. So the U.S. went to places like Japan and got automotive manufacturers there to voluntarily agree to restrict exports, like to a certain number of cars. So no tariffs, right, or low tariffs. The Japanese automakers said, sure, we won't send inexpensive, low-margin Honda Civics. We'll create a new car company called Lexus, and then all the other luxury brands, and it transformed the U.S. car industry.
Huh.
Right?
I didn't know any of that.
I did not know
it's
that.
really, really interesting. And now we're at a place where we have a lot of upheavals, You had a transformation of the U.S. economy from manufacturing in the 50s and 60s to now we're a service economy, and most of the heavy industrial and even light manufacturing has gone overseas. And you've got a lot of unease. You have people who've lost their jobs, and we're back to talking about tariffs.
So this is a real break from the Reagan era, right?
Oh yeah, it's a complete change.
And we've heard a lot of talk recently from our politicians, specifically President Trump, about tariffs. Why do you think that is?
Well, look, in international trade and international negotiations, sometimes it's easiest to do the easy thing, right? You can impose a tariff like that. You can impose a trade sanction on Iran or Russia like that as the president. You don't need legislation. You've got underlying legislative authority. Some of it's stronger than others, but you can do so quickly. It's also something that's easy to understand, right? So it's optically pretty easy to explain, and it's popular, right? The math doesn't really work all that well. But if you're somebody who has, worked in a factory for 30 years, and then the factory closes because of competition, or back where I grew up in Appalachia, in the coal industry, people who've worked in that industry and they're now in their 40s or 50s and they don't have a job and their skills don't transfer easily to something else, they're rightfully upset, right? The problem, though, is not international trade itself. It's that we as a country have been really good at lowering the price of goods through free trade, and we've been really bad at making sure we protect those who are harmed by that competition through no fault of their own.
So how do you know all this?
I'm just smart.
Well, it can't be that.
No, I practiced this. I practiced this for 10 years, and I have, I studied international economics, and it's a really interesting landscape, and it's all pretty complicated, and it's hard to explain sometimes, and yes, it is boring, unless you love it like me. But it matters. It really matters.
I just want to say you've done a really good job of putting this in terms that I think a layman can understand, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. When you're an everyday international tariff attorney, like what do you do? Like, do you call Japan and you're like, well, I'm going to need you to make some Lexus? Like,
Can I have another Civic, please?
Yeah. How do you dig into this?
Well, that's a great question, which is why you asked it. There are a lot of
great questions.
You do ask great questions.
You don't agree, but someone does.
So international trade is so complex that there are actually these hyper specialties, right? There are people who do only customs import law, and sometimes maybe only with textiles or tech. There are people who do only export controls and trade sanctions. There are people who do anti-dumping. You've heard about dumping and countervailing duties, which is basically when there's unfair competition from abroad and the U.S. imposes a tariff to offset the unfairness, right? So let's say you've got a foreign country that is subsidizing the manufacture of, let's say, steel. And we calculate that's saving them $50 per ton on the price of steel. Well, we can, and I think should, impose a $50 tax on the import to level the playing field, right? The math is a lot harder than that, but that's the basic idea, right? So you have people who do all these little different specialties.
Was your specialty dumping?
My specialty.
It just sounds like a funny word.
I was actually unusual in that I worked in 3 different offices in Chicago and DC at 2 different law firms, each of which had a different client portfolio. So I got to do the import side, the export control side, the trade sanctions side, all the anti-bribery. That's another area. Ooh. Yes. So are we for bribery or are we anti-bribery?
Reminds me of the Housewives.
And then doing a lot of defense, export control, trade sanctions work in DC. So I did a lot of different things in my 10 years, and I was really glad that I didn't get hyper pigeonholed, which happens to a lot of people.
Okay, let's bring this back to the person in Warren and Westerly and Warwick. What is the human cost of a prolonged tariff war in this country?
Well, there are a lot of costs. One of them is going to be uncertainty. One of them is going to be increased cost to consumers. I mean, one of the biggest challenges here is that we as a country are talking about using tariffs to bring back jobs, right? First of all, are they the jobs people are going to want to do? Second of all, that's a long-term gain, right? 10 to 20 years. Factories are expensive and they take time and they take money to build, right? it's a long-term possible solution for a very short-term problem right now. Things are expensive. We need to make them more affordable. We need to give people jobs. We need to bring in more money to the economy. So there's a mismatch in timing, assuming the strategy is right, which I really, there are a lot of challenges with it. But the impact in the short term is going to be a greater cost, possibly shortage of supply on things that are basic, that come from abroad. And then you're going to have questions in terms of what do we invest in here if we're trying to offset that and plan for the future. Do we build more car manufacturing plants here? Do we build more lithographic, computer circuit plants here? Do we build more furniture production plants here? That we don't really know, because every day there's a different story and a different decision. We've got a trade war, but oh no, we don't. But we have a pause, but no, we don't. That uncertainty, just what that's going to do, it's going to drive a lot of the sales that used to come to the U.S. to other markets. And I think we're going to see that play out over the next 10 years.
So I heard you say that this is something that a president could do sort of unilaterally.
Yep.
And that we've seen there be this uncertainty of like, oh, this is going to happen. Oh, no, it's rolled back temporarily. Is this real, or is this like a bargaining chip? Do we know? And like, are we impacted even at this local level by this uncertainty?
Yeah, we are. So the president has a great deal of executive power in international affairs, right? There's some areas where the president does not have clear express unilateral power, but Congress has delegated a lot, right? So there are statutory bases for these things. Now,
statutory basis, explain that.
Laws. There are laws
Okay.
Congress has passed that say the president has the authority to do this. So, for example, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act is the basis for if the president decides we should have sanctions on, say, Russia because it invaded Ukraine, right? Or Iran, or whoever else. Or emergency tariffs to protect national security and the economy. That's the basis for a lot of the tariffs that have been imposed. That's a big stretch. But there are other laws that would give the president authority to do a lot of this anyway.
So one of the words I hear a lot in the media about tariff policy is this word regressive. Can you explain to our audience what regressive means?
So, in a tax structure, you can either have the same percentage of tax at all levels. You can have taxes that are progressive, which is a higher percentage tax on higher earners. Or you can have regressive, which is basically has more impact on those who earn less. So let's say you're making $50,000 and tariffs are going to add $2,300 to your annual spending. That's almost 5%, or that's almost 5% of your total income. Well, if you're making $500,000, it's not, right? So it has a much greater percentage impact on those who make less, because it's not like the tariff is being charged at 20% on people who are millionaires, but only 2% on people who aren't. It's the same percent because it's on the good, right? And it doesn't matter who buys that good.
So basically, this potential tariff war has more of an effect on the working class, middle class person than it does for the billionaire.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to see more uncertainty. We're going to see more uncertainty. You're going to see trade deals that may shake out over the next 2 years with the United Kingdom, with European Union, with China. I don't quite know. I think where we're likely to end up is there are going to be increased tariffs at a more standardized rate for most countries that import into the U.S. But if you think about right now, the tariff rate, the average tariff rate in the U.S. is well below 3%, and it has been for decades. So it's pretty cheap, 3 cents on the dollar. Well, 10 cents on the dollar, right? You've just had what? So that's more than a 200% increase. So that is going to add, and we may not see it on a daily basis because you go to the grocery store and it doesn't say, grapes from Mexico, $1 plus 10 cents for tax plus sales tax, right? You just see $1.10. But it's going to affect the purchasing power of the U.S.
I feel like one of the things I was looking at is moving or potentially building a house. Mm-hmm. And
Better do it now.
Right. And so I stopped. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing nothing. I'm just going to sit here and wait to see what happens. But if the answer is it's more uncertain, then I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means like jump quickly, sign your contracts, or if that means keep waiting. The housing market is going to change. Like, I don't know how to plan.
It's that. When you figure it out, will you let me know? The interconnected effects are so interesting, because what's going to happen if demand for housing goes down because, say, lumber goes up in price, again, you're going to have lost jobs, you're going to have a slowing economy. The Fed will probably lower the interest rate to try and make it more affordable to buy a house with a loan. So where that sweet spot is going to be hard to predict, but you're going to get people who have to move. Right? 1979, 1980, mortgage rates were above 20%. People still had to move, right? You'll just have fewer people, and you'll have more people that will be staying put.
So let's try and end this on a positive note for Rhode Islanders. Is there any silver lining that you can see for Rhode Islanders in all of this?
Yes. I mean, so one of the things that we have done very well as a country is to lower the price of goods. One of the things we haven't always done well is figure out what we want versus what we need. I think it's an opportunity for people to step back and say, what do I really need? What do I really want? Right? So not just go and buy because you can. There may be opportunities, depending on how things shake out, for further investment in Rhode Island. I mean, one of the driving goals of the Trump administration is to bring jobs back to the U.S., right? And Rhode Island is filled with hardworking people who want to earn a living, and there may be opportunities for job growth here. But I think it's going to take years for that to shake out.
So do we shut down the podcast studio and reopening a jewelry business in the jewelry district?
Oh, I think we keep this service business open, and then we do jewelry on the side. So, but there might be opportunities there for job growth and investment and creation.
Okay, Greg.
I feel like that was positive.
That was great.
Yeah.
That was positive.
Yeah.
So before we go, we like to ask our guests one crazy question at the end. And so we know you moved here from West Virginia, kind of sight unseen, right?
Sight unseen.
During COVID.
Wait, yeah. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, my on-campus interview was on an iPhone. Yeah, it was crazy. So I'd never been to Bristol before I got the job, and I pulled into town, and I pulled over and started taking pictures of the sunset and fell in love immediately.
So what's the thing that surprised you the most about Rhode Island when you got here?
Was it the pizza strips?
Coffee milk.
Interesting.
Coffee milk. So I love coffee, but I had never had anything like coffee milk, and I've got to say it's pretty cool.
It's delicious.
I also never understood how yummy lemon ice could be. I didn't understand Dell's lemonade. I'm like, why is that a thing?
It's delicious.
And then I got it. I'm like, oh, this is totally a thing.
And now you order it for the law students like every quarter. It's crazy.
So I need to do a check-in on this. I still haven't been to Mr. Lemon. I know it's been several episodes since we talked about Mr. Lemon. Our previous guests have texted us to check in about my Mr. Lemon.
I think Gabe Amo won the election because he sided with Mr. Lemon and not Dell's in that debate at the law school.
But
oh my God, that's funny.
I have to say, like, someone who grew up in New York, having Italian ice, and then who moved to the Philadelphia area, although technically Delaware, where it's called water ice. Yes, like WUDDER, water ice. I can't get down with it.
And nobody's perfect.
I have not.
Nobody's perfect.
I have not.
Not even you.
Nicole, that's unacceptable.
I know. Maybe Mr. Lemon is exactly what I need. But like this place in Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia, called
You want
Rita's.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say
and
Rita's.
And they have the catchiest theme song, Be Cool, Eat a Rita's.
Can we talk about it's food, not a theme song, Nicole? Okay. Like it tastes, not sounds. Okay?
Okay. I'm sorry.
You're getting into an argument you're going to lose no matter what, Michael.
Okay, I'm going to go off topic because this is so important to me.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Ted Nisi, our former guest, posted something about one of his coworkers had done a deep dive into the Block Island Ferry song. I assume you know the Block.
Yeah, I know the Block Island Ferry song.
Even I know the Block Island Ferry song.
And it wasn't on Twitter, it was on LinkedIn. And I sent a message on LinkedIn that said, but can you get to the bottom of the cello's hidden song.
The what song?
So there is a hidden song, I think it's cellos, I'll have to check my social media, where if you call and you get put on hold, you get this amazing song, but you can't hear it anywhere else. And I've asked, so my hope is that there's going to be a Channel 12 investigation into this song so I can know who wrote this majestical bop.
Okay, folks, welcome to the Nicole Show.
It was something you were surprised at about Rhode Island?
I remember my brother telling me when I took this job that the weirdest thing, he went to Providence College, Rhode Island was the number of vanity plates per capita. And I agree with that. I've been to 49 of the 50 states, and I promise you there are more vanity plates here than anywhere else I've seen in the country.
Wow. I never knew that. Mine is the accents. Probably the first year I lived here, I could not understand what anyone is saying. So I remember there was this guy at my church named Rocky who's like lived in Riverside, I don't know, most of his life, his whole life. I could not understand a single thing he said. He would talk and I would just look at him like, okay, all right. And he was like just like an old like clam guy. No.
I think they talk fine. I think they speak fine in Rhode Island as Massachusetts.
Did you call him a clam guy?
Yeah. So they're in my town. There's a clam shack named after him, Rocky's Clam Shack, and he was like known for his clam chowder. But yeah, I could not understand a single thing he was saying.
Can you now?
So he's passed away now, but so not him personally, but yes, I've become accustomed to the Rhode Island accent and I love it.
Yeah.
It feels like home.
It does feel like home.
So let's wrap this up. Greg, thank you. Dean Bowman, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today and always supporting our work.
Dean Nicole, you're welcome. Thank you.
Dean?
Thank you so much, Greg. If this episode made you think differently about trade or tariffs, we ask you to subscribe to the Law 401 podcast and check out our show notes for more Rhode Island-focused information. And also, please give us a review wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a few stars. We would really appreciate it to help the audience find this new podcast. So until next time, keep questioning the law because it is affecting you and your wallet. Thanks for tuning in to the Law 401 Legal Issues Decoded podcast from Roger Williams University School of Law. We'd like to thank our guests on today's show. The Law 401 podcast wouldn't be possible without the generous funding from the Hassenfeld Family Foundation. We'd also like to thank our executive producer from RWU Law, Helga Melgar, the RWU Marketing and Communications team, and our production partners, Focus Forward Media and the Half Street Group. The opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Roger Williams University or our partners. For more Law 401 episodes and updates, visit law.rwu.edu, YouTube, or follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts.